Good morning and welcome to another one of my videos for Mosaic Art. I hope you're all well and that you enjoyed the bank holiday last week. This week I'm going to continue and complete the mosaic that I started 2 weeks ago. I haven't given it a name yet, possibly Happy or Spring. That's one of the two names that I've thought of for this mosaic. The design for this mosaic is very, very simple. It was just something that I drew in a few minutes, and it was mostly all about just the movement of the lines in the background, and just picking some interesting colors. So I did the basic drawing that you saw in my previous video, and now I'm just continuing with the background basically. So I've done the red. The red that you see, you can't see very well, but it actually has some golden streaks going through the glass, so that gives it a nice effect. But really, I had my choices were a little bit limited this time with colors. I didn't have exactly the colors that I wanted to start with, so I just improvised as I went along. I tried to use the colors in such a way that they look good next to each other. And also, one of the main things about this mosaic, even though it's a very basic design, I tried to use the colors that are very close to the flowers. I just try to make sure that there's enough contrast there and that it's not the same color. So, for example, I avoided putting yellow next to the yellow flower or greys and pinks next to the pink flowers. So it's common sense, but it's just one of those little things that helps your work to stand out a little bit more, your whatever your main object is in a mosaic, then that helps it to stand out. So the glass that I am using is called vitreous glass. So the larger tiles that you see, if this is the first time that you're watching a video for mosaics, the larger tiles that you see are called vitreous glass tiles. They come in lots of different colors and different textures. And I've cut them in half basically, so they are 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters wide, and then when you cut them in half you get these long rectangles. The smaller tiles are 12 millimeters by 12 millimeters. They are, I don't know really what the proper name is for them, but I bought a collection of colors that I mentioned before, and I'm still using them now. So I spent about 21 pounds and I got a very good amount of these smaller glass tiles. They are very good quality, and I believe they are frost proof as well, which means that they are suitable to use outdoors. Now, this board that I am using, I'm not really sure what it is. I still haven't found out the proper name. I might add a subtitle in a minute if I can look it up. I was meant to buy a kind of a cement foam board, but instead they sent me this, which is absolutely fine. It's very lightweight. I'm just not sure that it is actually suitable for outdoors, but in any case, it's very nice to work with. You can do your drawing on the board and use a pen or a pencil or a Sharpie, and then you can just directly glue your pieces onto the board with some good quality PVA glue. If you wanted to, you could use tile adhesive, but tile adhesive really is meant to be used on surfaces such as walls, or if you want to stick tiles onto another tile, or if you want to stick tiles onto a cement board or a cement foam board, then it's better if you have a material that has a similar consistency to your base. But in this case, because the base is basically covered in a kind of vinyl cloth or something like that, it looks like it's an artificial fiber cloth, then the PVA glue was absolutely fine. What I have done, and something to keep in mind, which I've mentioned many times before as well, is that if you are going to use PVA glue and you're using the vitreous tiles that have a texture underneath, you need to make sure that you're using plenty of glue, because you want to make sure that they stick down properly. So in that case, you might want to add, what you could do is you could use the PVA glue, but if you feel that you need something thicker underneath, you could add a little bit of tile adhesive to your PVA glue to make your PVA glue thicker, which I didn't do, but I just made sure that I was putting plenty of glue. And also with this mosaic, I decided from the beginning that I was going to grout it. However, I'm still putting the pieces very close together, as you can see. That's a personal preference. Some people don't mind if they have quite large gaps in between the tiles, but for me personally, I always like my mosaics to have very small gaps. So I've been quite relaxed in the beginning with the gaps, but then as I carried on, especially with the smaller tiles, basically I'm just gluing them right next to each other, the tiles. So every time that I am doing one section of this background, basically I treat it as a separate form on the mosaic. So I follow the outlines first. So I follow the outlines of that particular shape first, and then I work inwards. Sometimes you just have to think about which side you're going to start on first, because it just looks more effective sometimes if you do the outline on the one side first and then on the other side. That's a bit difficult to explain on the video, but again, that's something that comes with experience, and it just depends on the person and how much attention you're paying to the flow of your tiles. There's a certain flow, you read about that in books about mosaics and mosaic manuals, and people talk about that. There's a certain flow, just as there's a flow of lines when you're doing a drawing or when you're doing a painting. The brush strokes always have a certain flow, and you can use that to your advantage when you're painting something. And it's the same thing, it's exactly the same thing when you're doing mosaics. So for example, when I did the flowers, even though I didn't use very, very small pieces, I still tried to keep a certain flow to show some movement of the petals, that they are round and that they're going they have these outlines that go all around the petals. When you do this type of shapes, you usually do straight lines, which is very easy, and then you're always left with shapes that you need to cut, so triangles or trapezoids, or like a square with just the one side that needs cutting at an angle. So like I said before, there's different ways to do that. It comes with experience. You can just lay the square tile on top of your the space that you have left, like the little triangle or something, just to get an idea about the size of the piece that you need to cut, which is exactly what I'm doing here. And even after doing this, you know, for many years, you can always still get it wrong, and you just have to try a few times to get the right size that you want, especially if you want your pieces to be really, really close together. Then you need to cut your pieces very accurately. And this pair of cutters, the wheeled nippers, are really, really good for this purpose. You can cut pieces very accurately. I know it can be awkward at first, but practice makes perfect, as usual.
what's wrong. Something isn't right. Don't feel I belong in the light. Passion has gone and love's taken flight. Things just feel heavy tonight. I'm tasting no tears, I'm fighting no fears, but still there's a hole in my heart. Not on my own, but I feel it some what should I do? For reasons unknown, I don't need to decide. It's true that I don't have a clue. I'm tasting no tears, not fighting no fears. Still there's a hole in my heart. I'm wasting no time, I'm losing my mind. Here till the day I depart. Don't know what's wrong, something isn't right. Don't feel I belong in the light. Passion has gone and love's taken flight. Things just feel heavy tonight. Things just feel heavy tonight.
So there's a couple of other things I wanted to mention to you. Is that if you notice at the end of the video, when I finished the mosaic, I kind of chose more darker colors on the bottom side of the mosaic. So I have a deep red, a darkish green, and then I'm using a very dark blue and another dark blue and the purple, so that when you display the mosaic or from this side with the red on the bottom side, it just gives a sense of that it actually has more weight on the bottom. And then the top part of the mosaic, it does have some darker blue, but not as dark, and it just gives more of an impression of more light on the top part of the picture. Of course, this is like an abstract design, so you could just display it from any side you wish, but in my mind, and with the colors that I had available, I just ended up using these darker colors on the bottom side. So that's another interesting thing to consider when you are arranging your colors, not only how they look next to each other, because like I mentioned before, the effect of colors changes depending on what color you use next to it, but also the weight that they have in a design. Also, what I tried to do was not only because I didn't have enough colors of everything, but I also tried to make it a little bit more interesting. So every section of color, as you can see, is, for example, green, but different types of green, different shades of green. And I actually spent a little bit of time thinking about, which color should go around the edge of my section and which color should go on the inside. And the colors are actually a little bit different in real life than what you see on the video right now. But overall, I was really pleased with the result. I didn't think that it would come out so interesting. It's a very simple design, but at the same time, there's lots of things to look at. So I am very pleased with that. This kind of board, like I mentioned before, is basically foam, a very, very dense and rigid foam. that's covered on either side. Sometimes it's covered with a thin layer of cement in like a plastic mesh, or in this case it's covered on both sides with a kind of fabric. So that means that the edges are not very strong, and really for a piece like this it needs framing, a frame of some sort. You could use different things. You could use leftovers of wood, if you have it, wood strips. You could just paint around it if it's just for an indoor project. You could actually cover it with tile adhesive, which is what I have done, but I'm not sure how long that will last. You could just leave it as it is, or you could even get some metal strips. Sometimes it's possible to get copper strips, or maybe some other very soft metal. You can usually get that in a roll in DIY shops and craft shops, and you could actually use something like that. And because it's so soft, you could just use pins or something like that and literally just pin it all around. Some mosaic artists like to use copper sheet to cover their bases all around. In my case, I really wanted to make a wooden frame, but as usual, there was no time. I didn't plan it very well, and I didn't have the right type of wood to put all around, but that was what I was aiming for. So what I did in the end, if you've had enough and you just want to go to the end of the video, is the grout that I used, the tile adhesive. I colored that, and I used that to cover the edges as well. To be honest with you, it does work quite well for an indoor project. It's just a little bit tricky to get the edges really, really smooth, if that's what you want. I will show you in a bit. I used a sponge to smoothen the edges, but what you can do, and what's probably the best thing to do, is to cover it all over, cover it all around, and then when it's dry after 1 or 2 days, when it's properly dry, you can just sand it down, and that will give a nice smooth effect. The other thing you can do, which I showed you a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, is that you can cover the back of your mosaic with felt or any other type of fabric that you like, and that will give it a nice finish. And it's a nice thing to do if you want to give your mosaic to somebody as a present. So that's something that I do sometimes, and it just gives a nice finish to your work, and it won't make the wall dirty or scratch any surfaces. That's also a really good idea if you're doing coasters and you want to sell them or you want to give them to somebody. You can just get some felt from a DIY shop or a fabric shop really cheaply, and you can glue that onto the bottom of your coasters so they won't scratch the table, and the person that will receive them will be very pleased about that. You can see here as well, if you're not familiar with the materials that I'm using, that these vitreous tiles, sometimes you can buy them and they're just loose and clean. Sometimes they are stuck onto brown paper, and sometimes they come in these sheets that basically the tiles are stuck onto this plastic mesh. The glue that they use to stick them onto this plastic mesh is very, very strong, and please don't worry, there's no need to remove that glue. All you do is you can just peel them off that mesh. So that's what I'm doing here. Of course, this is something that I should have done before, but now I'm just using, every time I find a tile that I need, I just peel the mesh off the back of it, and if there's any glue left at the back of the tile, that's absolutely fine. It can just stay as it is. I'm not sure what glue they're using, but it is something strong. The reason for that is because these tiles are very often used in bathrooms, kitchens, and swimming pools, or other places like that. So they usually come in sheets that are a square foot, and you get the sheets ready on your mesh, and then they are ready for the tilers to apply them wherever they need to apply them. So that glue needs to be really strong to keep them in place, and then basically the tiler will just cut what they need and stick that onto whatever base they are using. A pair of tweezers is very, very useful if you want to start doing mosaics. You can get them very cheaply, again, at places like Pound World or any other type of shop that sells basic tools. I personally prefer the straight tweezers, and I like them to be really, really thin and fine for when I'm doing detailed work. But again, different people like to use different kinds of tweezers or cutters. You do need to be careful when you cut glass so that you don't cut yourself. And if you notice here, I'm not as messy as other times. I try to cut my pieces into a bowl or a tub, and if I do cut any pieces very small on top of my mosaic, then I make sure that I pick up the tiny shards immediately so that they don't fall on the floor. These vitreous tiles can be really, really sharp when you cut them, especially if you're cutting triangles and angles in general. So do be very careful when you're cutting these glass tiles. You will have noticed that in all of my mosaics now, I've only used glass. That's one of the reasons is because that's what I had available. But I think the main reason is that I think when you're starting off with mosaics, which is what I'm trying to help you with, I think it is much better to start with glass tiles. They're easier to cut. They come in many colors, really pleasant colors. And then later on you can move on to ceramic tiles or natural stone. I think it's actually easier to cut glass with the wheeled nippers if you have a problem with your wrist and you're finding it tiring. I think it's actually easier to cut glass tiles than to start cutting ceramic tiles with the nippers that are the cutters that are straight. This mosaic took me quite some time to complete, but you don't have to start with something so large. You can literally just do a few coasters or something much smaller for yourself, and as I've said before, just enjoy the process. So you can see here that I'm cutting those vitreous tiles in half. And I really do love the deep blues. For some reason which I don't know, the vitreous tiles come in lots of shades of blue. So if you like blue, then I'm sure that you can find the right shade for you. When I did my shopping a few weeks ago from Hobby Island, they had, if you go to the clearance page, they had a lot of shades of blue in vitreous tiles. So it's worth shopping around and seeing what they have available. Sometimes I just feel really, really tired, and I don't know how I'm going to, complete a project. But the beautiful thing about mosaics is that you can just stop and start as you please, as long as you clean all around your mosaicked area, like I've said before. Especially if you are using tile adhesive, you want to make sure that you are cleaning your space and leave it clean and your tools clean before you stop working for the day. But even when I'm really tired, sometimes if I have to finish a project, I'll just do literally one line, glue down a few pieces, and then I will have made some progress, even if it's just a few pieces in a straight row. So it's with mosaics, it's literally one piece at a time, and that's why some people call it the art or the craft of patience. You need patience when you're making a mosaic. You need to give it time. You're not going to get the results in 1 hour unless you are making something that's very, very small and you are very, very experienced. So here I'm almost coming to the end of my project. I am very, very pleased with the way that it turned out. I wasn't so sure at first. My design, like I said before, was very, very basic. And in my mind, it was a lot more simple. I thought that I was only going to use maybe 5 or 6 colors. And in my mind, there was a lot of white in the background and a lot of light colors. But as I started working and using all the glass that I have available, I suppose it just inspired me to make it more cheerful, more colorful, more vibrant. And I think that it turned out really, really good. As you can see, I've got lots of shades, so that's one of the reasons it took me a long time to complete, is because I had so many different shades that sometimes I just had to sit down and think about which one I'm going to use, So it can be overwhelming when you have too many colors. Sometimes it is possible to have too much. And that's why I said to you before that when you're doing your shopping, nowadays you can find virtually any color you can imagine and any type of tile you can imagine. Even stainless steel tiles are available. So if you are working on a project and you need some colors, the best thing to do is make a list. Maybe even just use some color paint and paint the colors that you need on a piece of paper, and make a few dots or little squares with the colors that you actually have in your mind, and then go online, or if you're lucky enough to have a mosaic shop near you, go online and then look for those specific colors. Otherwise, you can end up spending a lot of money to buying things that you don't really need at that point, unless of course they are an amazing bargain and you think to yourself, okay, this is worth buying. So when you're doing a mosaic like this, if this is something that you've never done before, when you've completed your mosaic with the PVA glue, using the PVA glue or any other type of glue, really you need to leave it to dry properly, at least for 24 hours before you do the grouting. Now, you can't really see on the video, but there is a little bit of glue on top of the tiles, but that's not a problem at all. What you do is the next day, when you are sure that your tiles are in place, are set in place, you can get a damp cloth, just water, nothing else. You can use some warm water and like exactly what I'm doing here, and just clean the top of your mosaic. It's a good idea to do this before you do your grouting. It just saves you a little bit of cleaning after and awkwardness. So you can't really see that well here, but there is quite a bit of glue, a PVA glue on top of my mosaic. So the first step when I've completed my design is to clean my tiles. Just use an old sponge, a little bit of water, and that's it really. If you're in a rush and you have to grout earlier, then you really shouldn't, but if you have to, then just be extra careful when you are cleaning and when you're applying your grout. But just keep in mind that it might take much longer for it to dry properly. That was an old grout that wasn't any good anymore, so I'm using my Unibond 2-in-1, which is tile adhesive and grout at the same time. This was very good value. This tub that you see here, I paid £5.50 for it from Wilko, and it's lasted me since the beginning, since I started doing these videos for you guys. I've only had to use that one tub, and the other one was £3, I believe, from Wilko. So here I'm using dark blue and red. Again, I wasn't sure which color to use as a grout, but in the end I decided to use a color similar to the gloves that I'm wearing here on this video. It's like a purple, and that's what I did. And what you do is you get your tile adhesive or grout, you add any water-based color. You don't want to add too much color because that will change the consistency of the grout, and then you use a spatula or your hands or a grout spreading tool to spread your grout all over freely and generously on your mosaic. It looks like a kind of a brown on the video, but it's because of the light. It's in the evening, but really it's a purple lilac color. Keep in mind as well that if you are mixing colors in your grout, they will always come out lighter when it's dry. So if you want, a deep blue, then you would have to add quite a bit of color into your grout. The other option, of course, is to buy colored grout, which is also widely available now. And I think that's probably more useful if you're really after a very deep color, such as black or dark blue. Then you would have to add too much paint to a basic white grout in order to get that color, and I don't think that would be very good, because it would just change the consistency of the grout, and you would probably have more pigment than grout. But if you're just after, you know, a pastel color, like a light gray or a light brown or something like that, then there's no need to go and buy colored grout. You can just add some paint, or even better is if you have natural pigments available at home, you know, the kind of pigments that people use for egg tempera. They can be a bit expensive, but you only need a very small amount. If you have that available at home, or even food coloring, which is in the form of powder, you could experiment with food coloring in the form of powder and see if that works for you. You can also add glitter, which is like one of the latest trends now is mosaics with glittery grout. And I know that there are some very, very fancy places, like, I don't know, hotels or places like that, that have mosaics on the floors and the walls. And the latest thing now is to have glittery grout as well on top of everything else. So that's completely up to you if you want to experiment and add things to your grout. Anything that fits can work. So you can add sand, a little bit of sand. You can add beads if you have any tiny beads. Some people like to use beads as grout, but then obviously that means that your gaps will have to be larger to make sure that the beads will fit in the gaps. So when you've done your grouting, you can leave it for a bit, not for too long, and you do a first cleaning, not a complete cleaning. You can take the excess off with your spatula, and then just use a damp sponge, not really wet, but damp sponge, and start cleaning, ideally from one edge, so from one corner of your work all the way to the other side, so you don't end up spreading the grout back again. You just need to be a little bit careful, because if you add too much water, then you're going to get holes in your gaps between your tiles. So it's just one of those little things that comes with experience. We're coming to the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I did actually really enjoy making this mosaic, and it did cheer me up in the last couple of weeks. I hope you enjoy the weather. Finally, we have some nicer days coming, and I hope that this has inspired you to create more and to create something new. And please, you can send comments, whatever you like, and let me know what you thought about this video. When you finish doing a basic cleaning, you can leave it for a couple of hours or so, or maybe even leave it until the next day to do the final cleaning. And remember that for cleaning mosaics, you never ever need any soap or anything like that. All you need is plain, clean water. Take care, and hopefully I will be able to do another video for you next week, and hopefully another inspiring project for you. And I will see you soon.